Hey everybody, my name is Krista Reiniger. I'm the founder and CEO of Silver Lining, and I'm so excited to be here with Jen Premisler from MasterCard, who has a big job. She's working on global strategies for small businesses. And really, the thing I love about her as I've gotten to know her is that not only is she super smart, but she actually cares about the small businesses that she's building these amazing tools for. So, we're going to talk a bit about obviously how COVID has changed the entire world, in particular payments and small businesses interaction with the types of things that MasterCard creates. So Jen, hello.
Thank you for having me. I really appreciate it.
No, it's so fun. So Jen, can you just tell us a bit about you, your history, and the work you're doing at MasterCard to start?
Sure. So I've been at MasterCard a little under 10 years. And I came in actually very strange pattern. I came in on the legal team. And so I worked really closely with our board of directors and our C suite on a whole host of projects as an attorney and advised them. And from there, I was really able to see the strategy of the company, where we were going on like a 5, 10 year type of trajectory. And it really opened my eyes to a lot of the potential that we had. And so I slowly moved into other groups of the company. I've spent time working with our entire payments ecosystem to make large structural and system changes for what we call bin changes, for those who are familiar with payments. And then a few years ago, came into the product space, specifically with a lens towards small business. So I was actually brought in for that specific segment.
Amazing. So we're going to talk obviously a lot about that. But before we go there, we're here. This whole summit is about sort of what the impact of COVID is on small business, how we reshape, rebound, revive. Um, so I know that Dave's been asking all the other speakers, what's your sort of, oh my gosh, I remember when story? What was the moment where you realized this is real, it's going to change things, buckle up?
Yeah, this is like our landing on the moon, Kennedy, all that stuff, right?
Totally.
So for our generations. So the first, I mean, I had seen it in the papers and, online blogs and what have you all through January. But the first real personal account was I was traveling at the end of January in like the last weekend to Toronto for some business work with a colleague of mine. And as we were getting off the plane, a number of other passengers departing from various planes were quickly huddled into certain holding areas through immigration. And we were allowed to pass relatively easily. Lots of people wearing masks, which was very, sort of new to us in the States. That was not something we were doing yet in New York. And that was kind of like oh my God, this is now right here. Toronto and New York, very close. That was the first. I remember coming home and talking to my husband about it, who's a public school teacher, and like, this might impact you soon as a teacher, which of course it very much did.
But
It might
understandable
affect our
here.
kids. Yeah, totally. And then, interestingly enough, I happen to live in the first town that closed their school district in New York. So we became the epicenter, not necessarily my town, but our area, and my schools decided to close. So it was a Sunday night when we got that call, March, let's say, I think it was 8th was a Sunday. And I only remember because I had a big meeting with international folks coming into our offices in New York that Monday. And I was like, are people getting on planes? As I'm getting a call from the school saying we're closing for 2 weeks for quarantine because one teacher had tested positive. Luckily, it was contained and everything was fine. But that was the second aha moment that it's now on the shores.
I actually remember right around that time you and I were emailing because we were supposed to have dinner in Melbourne on I think like March
Yes.
16th or something. And every day we were like,
Yep.
maybe, maybe not. Like it was, and ironically, you couldn't get to Melbourne and I'm stuck in Melbourne. So I mean, there's like the other sides of it.
Totally. Yeah. So that was actually that week of March 10th. I was supposed to leave that Friday for a long business trip in Australia. And about 2 days before I was supposed to leave, we actually, before anybody really called it, we called it, me and a colleague who were supposed to travel. We said, you know what? I don't know that we'll be able to get back because Australia was having some surge. And we're just not going to risk that because we both have kids at home.
Yeah, it's crazy. Gosh, it's
Yeah,
crazy. That was only really a couple months ago, right? It feels like it's been
I know.
seven lifetimes since then. Um,
It does. It
What's
does.
it meant for you personally? And I would, if you're okay with it, we had a conversation recently
Mhm.
that I thought was important, which is, you've got a big job. You also have kids at home. And I think it's
Hmm.
important for us to be talking about the dramatic impact this is having on women in particular who have careers and families.
Hmm. Yes.
And we were talking about, I read all this information about, a lot of the gains women have made in executive leadership and pay gap, have been abolished, in, decades of work abolished in just
Wiped
months,
out.
gone.
Hmm.
What's sort of, how has this impacted you personally before we start talking about work?
Yeah, so I think I'm actually not in the norm in that my husband and I very much have equal roles, and based on his career, he's able to flex for me a bit more than I would be for him, and but that's not typical, and I recognize that, and I recognize that I am fortunate in that way. But what it has done, I'll give you a little story. Last night, I'm on my computer. My office is in my bedroom now because our house is not that large, and just what you got to do.
Yep.
And my 6-year-old lately has been unwilling to go to sleep unless I'm there. And so the lights were off. I'm at my desk, the computer's on, and I am working. It's about 9 o'clock. And he literally says, "You're working too much." And like, "Can you come lay with me?" So I went and laid with him. I did stop. I figured I'd get back on as soon as he was sleeping, which I did do. But he actually hasn't been listening very well lately. So I made him a pact. I said, "If you listen better, then I will stop working so much. Like we need to both do this together. We both have to come to the table." So that lately, that's sort of how it's been affecting us. My kids are noticing. There's no real barrier between work and home, and I feel so fortunate because my leadership and my company are fully supportive of me taking the time I need, but I'm not doing the right thing. I'm not able to separate myself. And I imagine if I were the owner of a small business, that would be even harder because there's never any lines when you own your own business, and even more so now. And the needs are there, the issues are urgent, and I imagine that's very hard for folks in that position.
Yeah. Yeah, it's interesting. We obviously talk to small businesses every single day, and the pressure cooker that everyone is sort of in, all of us. And I think
Hmm.
you're right. I mean, for business owners, there's sort of a different version of it because the financial pressure is also so insane right
Yep.
now. But it is, and I keep trying to remind myself I'm doing a terrible job of this. But we're at the beginning of a marathon, not the end of a sprint. And I've been
Yes.
operating like I'm in a sprint. I have been running sprint levels, and that's not
Hmm.
sustainable for the inevitable amount of time this is probably going to take us to work through it. So, um,
Yeah, I had a mentor say to me the other day. I called her specifically because I needed someone to tell me what I needed to hear, and she said we all were acting in crisis mode, and it is a crisis, and there's a lot of crises going on, particularly in the U.S., but elsewhere as well. Pandemic globally, U.S. is having its own crisis moments that are pretty ugly.
yeah,
And she said, you can't be in crisis mode anymore. This is the time. Like July is literally the month to shift from crisis mode to get your own personal strategy, whether you own your own business, whether you work for somebody, whether your job is in the home, right, taking care of children, whatever it is. You need to change the outlook on this and make a plan that's going to be sustainable, because what we've all been doing is not sustainable for anybody.
yeah, I think that that's right, and it feels so obvious and so hard to do, right? Because
Mhm.
the urgency of the moment
Yes.
feels so real, but the toll
Hmm.
it's going to take on all of us is it'll be another
Yes.
pandemic, right? A pandemic of exhaustion and mental health and whatever other
Hmm.
outputs of this craziness come. Um, okay, so
Absolutely.
let's shift. How I mean, Mastercard is obviously a massively respected brand. How has
Hmm.
Mastercard handled this? Like, what has the executive team at Mastercard done? How have they? Has there been an obvious shift in strategy? What's going on inside Mastercard these days?
Yeah, so I think it's important to talk about sort of two angles on what they've done, because I think it's really a testament to who the company's always been, but you see it now in the time of crises. Like, I think that's when leadership, you can't fake it anymore. It's either really been there or it hasn't. And I feel really great and proud to be at a company where it's really been there. And that's leaders at all levels. I mean, right above me, I'm hoping to be doing as good as the people above me, and then the people below me, and all the way to the top. So a few things they did. Right away, they made us comfortable that this was going to have to be a flexible environment for all, and that people would have to make personal decisions, and they would support that. And that was huge. So just from a corporate culture perspective, that made us all feel comfortable. they also made some other statements about feeling secure in your job and what that would look like for the rest of the year. So that was helpful too. And then what they did after they did first, I think, focus on the employee base, which was commendable. And then from there, they started to think about, okay, we have a broader responsibility to be good stewards of the world, which has always been our motto and MO, right? We're the brand that came out with financial inclusion. We're the brand that is working with a lot of governments to help those in need and help the underbanked and unbanked around the world. So this was sort of an extension of what we already do. But what they came out in April and said, we're going to make a $250 million commitment to small business, because these are companies everywhere are going to be hurt, employees everywhere will be hurt, but the impact on small business will be exponentially more than the impact on large business. For a whole multitude of reasons, not least of which are access to data and technology, which I'm sure we'll talk about later, and some things we're going to do there. But we said that we would use that commitment through government, through other corporate partnerships and our customers, and direct to merchant too, to small merchant too, to provide information, tools, access to educational capabilities, and potentially also financial support. And then recently, I should say, I think it was the last month, we announced that of the 250, about 33 million would go specifically to India, because they've been very hard hit by the pandemic. Generally speaking, their small business segment has a lot of needs that haven't been addressed. And so we would focus there. And we're also doing a number of things around the world, big focus in the US too.
I'm going to ask you a hard question. I'm bracing for it.
Sure.
It's interesting. Obviously, when you talk to small businesses every day, they have complicated relationships with big brands, right? Many have brands that they really love and admire. Many feel very adverse to lots of brands who are trying to sell a market to them. Mm-hmm. By and large, small businesses have been disappointed by big companies' response to the pandemic. I think MasterCard is in the category of people really trying to do the right thing. And I'm not just saying that because we're talking. Mm-hmm. I genuinely believe that. Yes. But what are your thoughts in terms of the corporate response in general to this pandemic, and specifically through the lens of small business? Like, what are you seeing mm-hmm. among your peers and your peer companies? What's your opinion on that?
So my general view on corporate strategy, culture, and then that feeds into brand. And it's not just because I work at MasterCard, which does this, but it's just sort of ethically where I am, is that brands should have a moral compass. Yeah. And not all do. And there's several reasons for that, some of which might be how they were built and brought up, some of which might be how they're owned and led, some of which might be the business that they're in, which conflicts with certain ethics. But so some of those you're not seeing doing things right now, and that's a shame. There's also, and I hate to get political, but there is leadership needed at a federal level that would encourage partnership in a positive way with corporates. Now, they did actually do that for the pandemic, and I think that was commendable. And that's part of the work that MasterCard did, was to partner with the government right after we kind of saw that COVID was going to be a pandemic. And so there is some work being done. Now, where I think that brands who don't naturally have that ethical compass, where they could do better is really think about the knock-on effect. So if you want to be selfish in your decisions, at least be smart about it. Yeah. So what is the knock-on effect of the decisions you're making? Because at the end of the day, everything happens local, and small business is local for the most part. And so, except with the exception of some e-commerce, which has, a more larger potential, field to go after. But local is super important. And there is no company in the world that does not need local, because people live local, right? You don't live across a whole bunch of states. You live local. And so the consumer base and any customers you might have in like B2 small b are going to be local. And so really, as a company, no matter what you do, thinking about how you're going to help folks. I mean, I hate calling it Main Street, but that becomes divisive. But it sort of is this, if you're focused on how you're going to help local, that will ladder up to what you're doing, no matter what.
I think that that's great. It's interesting. I've been on like a little bit of a soapbox for all these months, and I keep saying if companies would take all the money they're spending on marketing and resource centers and webinar series and translate that to just actually helping businesses, right? Getting practical resources, discounts to services, actually practically helping. I feel like this is not a marketing moment. I feel like this is a pandemic where people need support in the most practical of
Yeah.
ways. And so I think every move a company can make towards that is great. Now, and that's a good segue into what
Yeah.
you guys are doing. So when you and I first
Yeah.
met, you were describing what you guys call the brain, which is this product strategy to support your partners who work with small businesses. So just at a high level, can you walk us through this massive product strategy that you're leading for MasterCard?
Yeah, so that's been rebranded, and I'll just, if it's okay, I'll just take a minute to talk about a few of the things that we're doing that are bigger than me and my team for sure. That the company that some of this ladders up to, because I think it's important, and has been really impactful in the short term, and then some of the stuff we're working on is not long term, but the next click. So a few things that we did when we made the $250 million commitment, we actually provided for free and direct to small merchant, which is not necessarily a channel we generally use because we work with our customer base and they have all the relationships with the small businesses. But we did start to offer free solutions instead of charging for them, things around fraud and education, around financial, wherewithal. We're putting together, there was recently an announcement, like in the last week, around a digital acceleration program for small businesses in the US in particular. And that gives small businesses access to an e-commerce store creator. So you were brick and mortar before, we're going to help you get online really quickly. Because the reality is that trend is staying. Yeah. That's not going anywhere. And consumers like it. Yeah. How much do you like being able to order first and then go pick it up? And then that time that you're engaging with that small business owner is more meaningful because you're having a conversation instead of just placing your order, paying, and leaving. So the more you can do up front helps. And so the digital acceleration package in the US, and that's going to be announced in several other countries as well, really helps small businesses do that. But they will help them do it in a safe and secure way. So some of the solutions we very early on made free through a public-facing website to small businesses is around fraud and safety and security of transactions. There's some misnomers out there, I think, in the small business community about electronic payments and that it's a cost center and there's no value. Well, there's a lot of value if you think about the safety and security of getting that payment. And then there's also a lot of other benefit. But so safety and security solutions is a big part of digital acceleration. There's a whole education portal. So we've teamed up in the US with a company to provide education. There's things you and I have talked about doing as well, so that we could provide coaching to small businesses where they really needed to see them through that whole process and help them, go through their ups and downs. Not part of digital acceleration today, but something we are talking about. And then another really cool tool that MasterCard rolled out, also free, is an capability that allows consumers. It's called Shop Openings, and merchants can elect to be in it. Small businesses can elect to be in it. And Shop Openings allows a consumer to see which of their local stores are open for business and they can go transact at. So it's like a directory where you can find who you can go to, which is great. And then the final thing that we've really been working on, a lot of these things are not new. They're things that we had in our toolbox, but we found new reasons and new ways to engage and bring them to small businesses in this pandemic time, and particularly as we stabilize in this pandemic time. And so the last one is around contactless click to pay, which is the ability to pay by pressing a button or using your credentials in a button. Card on file. How do you as a business keep a card safely, a consumer's card, and allow them to be able to check out seamlessly, but do that in a safe way. So we've upped our ante on a lot of those things as well. Always part of our bailiwick, but now, pushing it out in a different way.
Amazing. I actually have, we'll come back to what you're building. But on the way there,
Yeah.
we can a detour. You guys have so much data, and you mentioned consumer behavior, small business behavior. Are you seeing what trends or interesting insights are you guys seeing about both how small
Yeah.
businesses are behaving and how consumers are behaving in this moment?
Yeah. So I'll give you some trends on that, and then if it's okay, and then I can talk about what we're doing
Yeah.
specifically. There's four trends I actually see going on that are opportunities right now, but I'll go into some specifics. So the first trend that I see happening is embracing digitization. So
Mhm.
that includes a lot of things. One of them is engagement as a small business with your consumers. So how can you better in a digital way engage? That could be an e-commerce site, but it could also just be social media marketing, the ability to sell on social media, selling on marketplaces, using, even if you don't want to do any of that, you can market digitally. And then have them come into your brick and mortar store and shop. So those are things that if you're not doing now, you really need to be, because nobody's walking down Main Street right now, hanging out, going from store to store. That's culturally just not where we are. So in some way, you have to digitally engage the consumer in order to bring them in. And then also digitizing your payment makes not only your process more seamless, but also is good for the consumer. So in the US, and it's different per market. So there's some markets around the world, Australia, Europe, where contactless and tap to pay, or insert your card, or any of those, where you didn't have to turn your card over to the reception or the clerk. That's pretty common in other parts of the world. We're only just getting there, right? In the US, we've done better and better over time. More cards have that capability, really great lately, and more businesses are accepting it. But in a world of COVID where you don't want to touch people or don't want to touch things that other people have touched, that's important. So big move there. We have seen that 46%, sorry, of consumers in during March changed the card they were using, what we call a top of wallet card, the card they like using, if it did not have contactless capability. So if you
Wow.
couldn't tap to pay or use it in a wallet, they were moving away from it because they recognized that enough businesses were accepting that kind of payment. So that's the big shift. So as more businesses accept that kind of payment, the consumers clearly want that, particularly post COVID. I mean, we're on our way there,
Yeah.
but COVID's really moved that forward.
Yeah.
And then 74% of consumers that we polled through a survey said that they would remain contactless after
Regardless.
COVID. So they're not going back. No.
Yeah.
And I have to tell you anecdotally, I've been shopping locally very much, and we'll get to the other trends. One of them is about local. One of the things that actually frustrated me recently was, and it's, yeah, I'm sure it's probably because I work at MasterCard, but I don't want to touch things at this point, right? I don't want to touch something you just touched, whatever. It's not because I don't love you. It's just
Yeah. I get
we
it.
all want to stay safe.
Yeah.
And I don't want to wear gloves everywhere either. I'd rather wash my hands. So I went into my favorite bagel shop here in New York. Bagels are big. And we went to get Sunday bagels, which is a thing. And they still are taking cash. And they still take cash or check. And I thought, and you can order ahead by calling. They won't go online. And I thought, guys, and I spoke to the owner. I said, listen, here's an opportunity I think that you're missing, because you've got a line 20 people deep because we have to stand 6 feet apart. And people love these bagels. They do love them. People are leaving your line.
Yeah.
Now, if they could just order online and then know when they could pick up and pay, we'd be a lot quicker here. You'd have a lot more sales. And so I'm seeing some who are still not willing to make that change. I think you're going to lose. So if the bagel place down the street does it, you're out. So you got to kind of get to that digitization. So that's a big one. The other big trend with respect to digital or stats is e-commerce sale grew 209% in the March April time period from the year before. 209%.
Crazy.
And yes, that's because that was a big option, right? You didn't have the option to go to stores in March; they closed. But if that's the case, they're not coming back down to 60%.
Yeah.
They're staying, maybe not at 200, but they're staying high. So you've got to be able to figure out how you become part of that digital engagement as a small business and get your consumers used to engaging with you there. It will benefit you in the long run. And then, with that though, if you're engaging digitally, you have to be really careful as a small business to make sure that not only you're safe from a cyber perspective, but also that your consumers are safe from a fraud perspective and cyber. So there's a lot of solutions we have available, but make sure whoever you're doing it through, make sure that you are thinking about the risk and the reward. So there's a lot of reward for going digital. All you have to do is mitigate that risk. There are solutions for it. And unfortunately, in polls that were recently done, 80% of small businesses still are not thinking about cyber risk. And it is important that they do that
Yeah,
because digital is here to stay.
yeah, I think that we're trying to get this message across to our small businesses every day. Like, this is not a trend. This is now the way it is. It was
Mm-hmm.
going to be the way it
Yes.
is. It was coming no matter what, but now it's actually here.
Yeah.
The couple of years or the 5 years you thought you had, you don't. And I think you're
Mm-hmm.
right. I think businesses are really overwhelmed with selling digitally, marketing digitally, thinking about fraud on the back end, understanding how to use data and tech. I think we have this, a wealth divide that is going to be exaggerated by, a tech divide, right?
Mm-hmm.
A new version of the
Yes.
wealth divide, a new driver of the wealth divide. So businesses need a lot of help, which is a great segue too.
Yeah.
What are you building?
Yes. So the other three trends are related to what we're building.
Right.
So another trend we're seeing is providing ease and access to capital and better data for underwriting metrics for small businesses. So for too long, small businesses have been either looked at as consumers, like the owner who owns a small business is from a capital perspective, what they look at, or they're looking for the types of metrics you would see on a medium or large size business. And it's just not the same. There's no ratings, there's not the same type of cash flow liquidity that you would expect to see in a large business. You cannot expect that in a small business, and it would be inappropriate. They may be doing something wrong if they have all this cash sitting there, because you want to make sure you're investing your cash to continue to grow. And so we are doing work around providing and working with partners to get better access to capital for small businesses, leveraging our data and partner data to be able to help lenders make better decisions. So a lot of work going on there. The third trend is around democratizing the data. So you were talking about this a little bit before, and democratizing data and technology is huge for consumers and small businesses. So I think it goes both ways. And just a little side note, I think it's part of what goes into the conversation we had at the beginning with respect to women. Democratizing data and technology help women and people of color and minorities equalize, not fully, but a little bit more equalize. So this is a big one. So what we're doing to democratize data for small businesses is to be able to leverage data we have and our partners have to provide plain language insights to the small business so that they have a quicker snapshot of what's going on with their business. Would they be doing better? And this is stuff we were working on before COVID. I think it's as relevant now. So um, one of the insights that we've built is small business, you are only a brick and mortar today. Did you know that businesses who also sell online in your geographic area that are like you do about 20% better a year? Well, that's a helpful insight to a small business. They may say, well, I would like to learn more about selling online. What could that look like? There's variations of what that looks like. It's not just create a web store. There's lots of ways you can do it. And the tool that we've been working on, which formerly we had another name, we now call it the Merchant Business Accelerator. We're going to help you accelerate your business through these insights. It provides that insight to you, and then it gives you a link to a product to help you sell online. And there's various forms of that, as I said. So it's all in one place too. One of the things I think, and this is not new news, you all know this, whether you are a small business or you're selling to small businesses, you know this. The small business owner does not have time. They wear a lot of hats and they don't want to go to 10 different vendors to get 10 different solutions. The more that you can bring them in one place, the better. It makes them more efficient, provides them more value. So what we're doing through this tool, the Merchant Business Accelerator, is being able to provide lots of different insights about the small business's business. We have insights about repeat customers, new customers, where your customers coming from, that helps them with marketing campaigns, when to put out offers, that kind of stuff. We have insights related to when funding might be needed, when their cash flow looks like it may need some help or a boost, and it looks out prospectively as well as retroactively. That's where our access to capital capabilities come in, and then other solutions for their everyday business needs. Does it look like they're managing their day-to-day business properly? Could they use solutions through some of our partners that would help them manage their books, help them with their taxes, help them we were just actually having a conversation this morning. We're going to be adding insurances to this capability. So, and this looks a little different in the US for regulatory and also just the way that we buy insurances in the US. But in lots of parts of the world, people buy insurance for one day. And small business owners who have to travel from their wares from one place to the next buy insurance for one day while they're on the road selling.
Wow.
I know. It doesn't totally resonate in the US, but it is very common. And they buy all types of insurance. Some we don't want to get into because they're kind of, one of the things that in a rough area, you may buy like death insurance for a day.
Right.
You may buy medical insurance for a day because your local doctor is not going to take, sorry. This is the new normal.
I know, this is it. No problem. Go ahead.
All right. So if anybody, so if you're traveling from one place to the next and your local doctor's not traveling with you, you may need to buy insurance in case something happens to you in your next city where you're going for your business trip. And again, that's not a very US centric view, but it is the case in other areas. So things like this, being able to recommend these things based on real data about that small business's business, and being able to tell them something that will help them run and grow and giving them the tools to do that is really important. So we've been focused on that.
I love it. And it's so, like we've spoken about, I think any company that is truly thinking small business first, right? Like, what are the challenges small business face and how do we solve those problems? That is going to survive this pandemic, right? As opposed to, well, this is what I want to sell and how can I market crazy. We're hearing over and over and over again that small business are they're so fatigued from marketing and emails and ads. And so I think the brands who actually help them are the ones that are going to earn loyalty and credibility and growth, in this moment, for sure.
Yeah. And two things I think about that. The first one is you as a brand, your job is to really look at their needs, right? Like you're not doing your customers and your end users, because sometimes you're working through a third party, like customer, any service. If you're creating something, even if you think it's the greatest thing, and it very well may be, but just trying to push it. So the point is work backwards from what are the needs of the end user you're trying to solve and how can they best consume it? And that will tell you how you best deliver it and what you should deliver. That's the first thing. And then the second thing is my view is brands should not be afraid to partner with other brands or other even smaller companies to be able to deliver. So no one should be an expert on everything. That's a bad idea, actually. We see some companies trying to do that, and I would argue at some point, we talk about too big to fail. It's also too much to fail, right? Like you can't do too many things at once. That's not concentrated. So it's important to partner with the right partners to be able to deliver what you need to fulfill all those needs instead of trying to fulfill just one need. Because again, the small business in particular does not want to go to 10 vendors.
Yeah, no, I think you're exactly right. Okay, two final questions, and actually, they're I don't know where to go first, so I'll go to this first. Marketing to small businesses is hard on the best of days. It feels impossible in this moment where they truly are so overwhelmed. Anything you guys are seeing that seems to be working in terms of communicating with small businesses so that they hear and they get it and they connect with
it? As we're marketing to the small business?
Yeah.
So there's two things. One is going right at their need and explaining to them how this solves their problem.
Yeah.
So again, just like you want to create with that in mind, you want to market with that in mind. So, and then also finding the right moments, and this will depend on your capability as a company and brand to do this, but finding the right moments to do the right thing and not just focus on revenue. When you're a big brand, you can do that, and you should. I think it's been integral to us having success in getting the tools and solutions a small business need during COVID into their hands.
Yeah, I agree with that so much. So much. Thank you for saying that. Okay, my last question. You alluded to it earlier. Obviously, we have this in common. We have this in common. So much of the work you're doing is in partnership with other organizations. You've alluded to the fact that that's important. And in a lot of ways, a lot of what you're doing isn't actually direct to the small business, right? It's through partners to the small business. So I'm assuming most people would think of MasterCard's partners as being financial institutions, period. For anyone
Mm.
listening or just in general, what are the types of partnerships you're building right now that are working in the B to SMB space? And what do you need? How can the
Yeah.
listeners that are here be engaged and supportive to what you guys are doing?
So financial institutions and banks are definitely still our customers, and we partner with them, and they do have great reach for small business. Now they're doing a lot of work to be seen as a trusted advisor who can provide lots of solutions. So some of the things we're doing through the Merchant Business Accelerator is to help them do that because they're the ones who have that relationship, whether through retail banking, business banking, lending, or acquiring. They're working directly with the small business, but we are also acknowledging that not only do our financial institution partners need other partners to work with to get to the small business, but so do we. And so we've partnered with this has sort of been a long time in the making. Governments have been a place that we've partnered for many years for a whole host of things. Big small business focus right now in the US and elsewhere. We do believe that governments have access to every business and every person, and they should not only can but should be there to support all types of businesses, no matter their size and revenue. So we partner with governments, and we see a lot of positive things happening during COVID there. And then technology partners as well. And I'm sure I'm missing a whole host of other companies because we work with insurance companies that reach small businesses and et cetera. But just to give another example, technology companies. So there's several technology companies, and I'm using that broadly because lots of types of companies can fall into that bucket, including your own.
Yep.
And companies that are leveraging technology to reach the small business to provide whatever solution they're providing. So could be insurance capabilities, could be marketing capabilities, could be general SaaS capabilities. So we have a partnership that was announced about a year ago with Zoho as a technology partner of ours that we're really excited about. We're doing a number of things with them, and that we're trying to reach small businesses to provide the Zoho solutions, but also to provide MasterCard solutions that have been integrated into Zoho, and some things that we're co-creating. And then, we've been talking about Your Great Solution and how we partner together to help coach and reach small businesses to really help them through their journey. So and leveraging technology for that, because you do a lot of on the technology side for it, which I think is cool. So those types of partners. And then, it would surprise people, but a lot of technology companies that the public may think are our, competition or frenemies are actually customers of ours, and we partner with them every day. And yeah, sometimes you have to figure out which swim lane is which, but if you're focused on getting to the small business, you'll get there. So for instance, in the US with our digital acceleration announcement this week, that is being the way that we're getting businesses online in the US is through several different solutions. We have our own homegrown e-commerce store creator that we integrate into banks and our traditional FI customers, and they can roll out to their small businesses. But we also have done partnerships with Shopify and others to be able to bring something really quick to a small business that integrates MasterCard capabilities with theirs. So even though it would seem that they may be competitors, it's actually that we can work together to fulfill the needs of the small business, which is the important part.
I love that. That's such a good note to end on, right? Like, I do believe that the way we're going to get through this is together, right? None of it, no one company, no one person is going to be able to solve this,
Nope.
and we're in for the long run. And so if we can be values oriented, small business first, and then collaborate and bring what we all have to the table, we can make, we can get through it. We can create opportunity out of it, but better together than apart.
Yeah.
All
Absolutely.
right, thank
Totally
you
agree.
so much. Thank you for your time. Thank you for your insight. Thank you for everything you're doing for small businesses. And onwards we go.
Have a great day.
Thank you.